Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is episode 1 of Split Peak Soup. I'm Neil Carney, your host, and I'm here with Matthew Myers, surf coach extraordinaire. So thank you, Matt, for coming. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Neil. It's a pleasure to be here, especially episode 1. So psyching. Let's do this.
Yeah, I'm stoked. Thanks a lot. Let's just get into it. Matt Myers, really good surfer, great guy, and he's making a name for himself as a surfing coach. And we're just really glad to have him here with all his knowledge and just kind of want to pick your brain a little bit. So let's start out with you're back in Santa Cruz. You got some downtime. What have you been doing since you've been home?
Yeah, so you mean just this last kind of few months?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just with my Myers Surf Mentorship program. Obviously, there's a lot of travels involved for most of the year, but as you just mentioned, I've been home for probably the longest stint I've been since I moved. I moved back home 4 years ago after 9 years down in Southern California, working in the surf industry, doing that whole thing. But since I've been home, it's been pretty much go, go, go. Last year, I think my United app told me I did like 38 flights, something like that in the year, which is like, if you think it's over 3 flights a month or something like that.
Yeah.
So a lot of that. But we just had a baby in January. So basically
right.
since early December, I camped out at home here with my wife as we prepared for the birth of our son, Jagger, who was born on January 21st. So he's just about almost 8 weeks old today. So it's pretty exciting. And just being a dad and learning what that's like and that whole huge change of life, obviously. So a lot less travel time to the events, but I've really been able to spend the last few weeks working with a lot of the local talent here and even had some international visitors. So it's been cool for me to kind of mix it up and not just be coaching events and now doing a bit more like the one-on-one work I like to do.
Yeah, totally. And just speaking about that, you're working with a lot of local young talented surfers, and Brody just one of your clients just had a real big win. Tell me about that and about maybe his training and why you think he was able to get the job done the way he did.
Yeah. Thanks, Neil. Brody, and I've seen him around town for numerous years. He's definitely been on the come up for a long time. He's a Pleasure Point, local as far as his home break. Growing up kind of on the east side, lives in SoCal. His parents have been cool, kind of just been keeping me in the loop the last couple of years. And then just kind of with my schedule opening up, we partnered up just the beginning of January this year. It's new for us. So he's worked with some really talented coaches here in the past, which really helped groom him to where he is today. But he's a USA national team member. So he's like on that elite kind of course within the Surfing America program for his age group, U16. And just over those last, I guess it'd be 2 to 2.5 months, we've been working together. And he's just blown me away with his talents, really. He's a very composed surfer, pretty mature for his age. And he has just like really good fundamentals. And what I tell him all the time is just like his rail game, I think for his age globally is probably pretty world class. And lucky for us, right, we got to grow up in these amazing right-hand point breaks that allows us to have a nice style and technique and flow and whatnot. We don't have to create all our own speed like the people that grow up in challenging closeout beach breaks, So he just has, some elite rail game. And that really led to him to win this event last weekend at the Lane, which is it was a big event. It's the biggest local event actually we have right now. There's no Cold Water Classic. So for these junior surfers, it's a really big deal. And to win at your home or in your hometown in front of your friends and family is obviously like a huge cherry on top.
Totally. Yeah. I saw some clips and his rail game was super sharp, looked like a point of difference. So congratulations again on that. And then are there any other kids? I know you have a number of people you're working with, but are there any people or kids who you're just really impressed with right now, and without singling any of them other ones out?
Yeah, just in the local scene. Mm-hmm. So I just think, just looking at you across the table here, we're rocking the board riders gear. You got the hoodie and the hat. I got the hat on, and just been really cool over the last, I think it's like 7 years since the club got together and started, but just watching, it's just such a great way for the youth to connect to the pros, to connect to the, I guess, men than the carps. So, and, and the women
Right.
across all those age groups. So it's really a great way for us all to stay connected, like all the way from, Richard Schmidt's probably one of the oldest guys in the club that's ripping, down to like Rufo. And then we got Frog and that whole generation. And then all the rip gnarly guys. And then obviously the pros, the Burns, Waggies, Nats, Sam Coffey, all those guys. And then the Groms get to kind of watch all of us and connect with us. And we do these rad road trips, and you get Randy Bonds driving the van and all the Groms in there. So I think this program, which we got to really thank the people down south. It started in Australia. Guys down south adopted it, and then we've just brought it on up here. It's just allowed these kids to kind of see a little pathway for themselves.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to touch on that. But as far as the local talent, I'm one of the captains of the club. Pete Mel's our head coach right now, and we have to like make these picks. And in our 15 to 19 age group, so that's one of the divisions, it's the most stacked group we have by far. Like for us to pick 4 is really hard. We kind of have a list of 8 or 9 that are like legit, that could, like, you could literally put any 4 of them in there and it would be like a proper squad. And a lot of them are even in the younger ages of that division, like 15, 16.
Right.
Not even many of them are 19, aging out. So we got the Wheat Cup, which is the California Cup, coming up next month or in May. And then the U.S. Board Riders Championship. It's all at lowers. And for us to pick that team, it's pretty tricky right now because there's like so many good kids. And I mean, I could try and name them all off, but I don't want to forget anybody, know.
That's
but
fine.
From like, Jackson Taylor, James Daniel, Adam Bartlett, and Max St. Dennis, Strider, and the list goes on and on. There's like 4 or 5 more that are just super gnarly. And it's pretty cool to be surrounded by that right now.
And so we've been fairly dominant as far as the West Coast Board Riders clubs contests and, regionals go and stuff like that. But, it seems like San Clemente has a stranglehold. Obviously, it's in their backyard. But what do you think that it would take this year for Santa Cruz to, rise to the top?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've spent a good time on the microphone at those events, kind of like hyping everyone up and hyping the club. And I kind of always say the same spiel every time, but we've pretty much gotten like second every year. So the first 2 Wheat Cups were in Huntington, and Huntington beat us, and we came second. And then the next 3 years has been at lowers. We've pretty much gotten second every year to San Clemente there. So like, we're like the perennial bridesmaids of that event. So like, I'm always like trying to motivate us and see if we could put our best team together. I don't know if we've ever had our best team all show up together for that event. So having a Nat Young and like a Sean Burns available this year will be massive.
Right.
But also what we all say too is like, if this event could maybe be at the Lane one time or something, and they have to come up here, and I think it would really give us a proper, shot to win. And obviously we'd have the home court advantage there.
Yeah, totally. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Maybe someday, I don't know, we gotta put a request in with Brillo or whoever's
exactly.
in charge of that one.
Brillo knows. We've told him, and he's considered it. But having like, no one's gonna want to like give up lowers to come to the Lane.
Yeah, that'll be a hard one.
But it would be our chance.
It would be,
and we could win. We really could. I think there's a couple former elite talents that we have, like former pro surfer elite talents in this town that have not shown up for these club events because they told us they're quote unquote retired. I mean, I don't think you have to come out of retirement as a competitor to do these events because it's a club event. But the day that Adam Riplogel and Kieran Horn show up, I think guys might be tripping.
Yeah. Well,
or a rap boy too.
Yeah, dude, we're stacked with talent here in Santa Cruz, which is a beautiful thing. One thing I was wanting to kind of go back a little bit to just touch on, we grew up in a time when surfing, I mean, we both were very talented surfers, but not by any means the best in town. But we were still afforded the chance to get travel budget, a couple little bucks here and there, all the free product we could really ask for, and then some. But it seems like, the atmosphere has changed a lot, and as far as like the opportunities that kids are getting. And so, being immersed in this, like, how tough is it for a young kid to, pursue this dream of surfing and, even for us, like maybe it wasn't something that we would want to do the rest of our lives, but we had this opportunity to really see the world and do a lot of cool things. So just wondering, like how many of those opportunities come up for kids these days, and what does it take? Like, how do they have to differentiate themselves to make it now?
That's a great question. And yeah, we were super fortunate to kind of be in the back end of the glory years. I think the generation right before us definitely scored the hardest as far as endemic sponsorships is concerned. The guys were just stacking local pro, being a local pro surfer was across the board, big time in those magazine days. And we got a little piece of that, which was really, really nice. And we're super grateful for that opportunity. And for these kids, it's everything's changed. It's this new digital era where social media reigns supreme. So you kind of got to pick your lanes, I guess, and being just a core competitive surfer is going to be really hard if you're not like the best of the best and, that 1%. And you making the world tour and doing well at that level, as far as a competitive surfer. And if you're not in that, you better be creative, you better be marketable, you better be outgoing, you got to be likable, just being a little punk or being super quiet and not, doing the posting and stuff. It's going to be tough for you.
Right.
My background, right, almost 10 years as the team manager for Rip Curl North America. I got to spend a lot of time with doing contracts for all those surfers and figuring out what we're paying people for what they're kind of worth and what they're providing kind of ROI on investment, So, yeah, you could be a YouTuber like a Ben Gravy, right? Or these guys, and there's Groms that are maybe going to be taking that direction. Like Jamie O'Brien, these guys, they're not competing, but they're pro surfers,
Yeah.
doing the YouTube thing. And then there's on the women's side, there's obviously modeling kind of style opportunities, being an influencer through social media, and there's different avenues for guys to do that. Just probably not quite as many, but it's definitely an opportunity there. And then if you want to be like just a rad free surfer, that's tough. It's possible. Like if you look at the guys that Stab's promoting heavily, they're out there,
Right.
but just being in those buckets, it's pretty slim, So I think at the end of it all, Neil, it's like you got to do it because you love it, and you got to work harder than your peers.
Right. Yes.
Those are the keys.
Yeah.
And you got to love it.
I think Sterling Spencer on his podcast was kind of just talking about, a trap. Sometimes guys in Florida can be too complacent about, following their dreams, which may or may not be true. I'm not from there, but he was just saying he's like make content, like do it, get psyched and start filming stuff. Just point the camera at yourself and see what sticks. Is there any work that you do with your clients to address maybe some of those interests in that type of media content, or is that something that kind of you're just focusing more on like the skill and competition side?
For sure. I guess the reason why I don't call myself just a surf coach is because I want to be much bigger than that. That's why it's a mentorship. And just like yesterday, I spent the entire day with Zoe Chait. He was from Half Moon Bay, just an hour up the way. And I did a 3-hour training with her at the lane, getting her ready for there's a big event in Barbados, QS next week we're headed off to. And I think she's got a great chance of ripping that event. The style of surfing that she does is a really powerful regular footer. But then the rest of the day we went, like her boards were all white. She has like a whole quiver of white boards. I'm like, dude, you gotta get color on your boards, like make the photographers like Nelly happy. And it looks better. Like I think it looks better at the contest sometimes too, or even filming with me at an event, the chances of me making sure I get your clips are higher. Cause like if there's 40 guys out training for the contest, if you have a bright board, it's so much easier to find them in the lineup. So she just came over to my house yesterday and we hung out for hours and like sprayed the boards and just talked life and talked about these things that you're kind of asking about right now. And then her and I had a fun surf at the end of the day. So it was like an all day affair, her and I hanging out. And it was really fun. And I guess back to your question. Yeah, I'm here to like point these surfers in the right direction with helping with their sponsorships, helping with their marketability, anything I can do to help them in any which way. I'm not necessarily like a YouTube expert, but I have a cool channel that's got a couple hundred subscribers. And last year we put out a lot of content on there around the contest focus for the Wet Shoulder League, which was like our Challenger series kind of video series. And I got to hire a really cool guy, Brady Lawrence, who did 5 years of social media with the WSL. So he brought a really cool perspective to that.
Sick. Is that something that you want to keep
continue
doing in the future?
Yeah, I'd love to. I think it all just comes down to like timing with everything in life. So if it's like, if we have like the right crew and we were really looking for sponsorships for that, and we actually didn't end up having much success. But I'm not giving up on that dream. So I think whether or not it happens this year, maybe in the future years, we can bring that back and make it bigger and better. And yeah, it just comes down to making sure, like, I want to make sure Brady's like reward or like, you know, earns his right value for his time and whatnot. So like last year was pretty scrappy with how we pulled it off, but hopefully we can return that, you know, someday.
Yeah. And let's talk about another kind of component of training these days for young athletes or any athlete surfer. Now we have this, you know, always consistent and perfect wave pools. How much of that are you seeing become, you know, a real big part of these surfers' training, and yeah, just kind of like part of their act, because they're going to have to learn how to surf in pools if there's going to be more pools and contests there. It's just fascinating to me.
No, it is. It is. And there's always, like, I guess, ever since the North Shore movie, there's the running joke of like the surfer coming from a wave pool, right? That's like where they started. And
right, yeah,
dude, it's gonna happen.
Sure, I'm sure. Yeah, guaranteed.
He's gonna be like, oh man, trying to read a lineup is gonna be tricky though.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
Tracking down the swell or like the sets.
Totally.
But oh dude, the surfers that, you know, again, like, hate to say it, but it is a little bit like of a rich man sport a little bit, right? I guess, I mean, I'm sure like snowboarding, things like that too. But just if you have the financial ability to put time in a wave pool, wave pools are really expensive to go to. But if you have that like ability to put real time on the air sections, it is, you're seeing it with Aaron Brooks. Like, it's a proven, like, I went to with Aaron Brooks to Waco. I did a trip with her and Bethany Hamilton years ago, little rip curl project. And she was like 13 maybe at the time, and she was already doing full rotations, you know, and her dad like really like set her up in a great space, and she had like a lot of support from a lot of places, but just being able to get the reps in and learn the technique to do those maneuvers. And now that she translates them to the water, and she's a rookie on the CT, and like a lot of people are picking her as a world title favorite. You know, I don't think she's 17 years old.
Yeah. And then I talked to Adam Bartlett when he got back from Waco, and he busted his hoof doing an air, and he hurt his ankle. Like skateboarding, right? You throw yourself in the air that many times if you're going to have a perfect ramp to do it with, you know, I don't know, 20 times in one day. Are you seeing a lot of injuries at wave pools? And if so, do you think that maybe some of that stuff like the cross training or the gym work would kind of help that or strengthening?
Yeah, no, you're right. I think for any of the aerialists, strength training and flexibility work is super important. Just to be able to withstand the beatings that come with like the repetition and stomping. Those airs are pretty hard on your body. But I think if you're young and you're strong and you're focused and you don't try to stomp the wrong airs too, you know, there's certain times you find yourself in really awkward positions, and maybe those ones you want to kick away or just like land gently on your board and fall over. But like when you're like committing and like biting your lip and like I'm gonna stomp this one, like that's like the chance of where the injuries probably sometimes do happen, if the implosion of the lips coming back up at your board and things like that. But yeah, I think anyone who has that specifically aerial approach, progressive type maneuvers in the wave pool, if you have that opportunity, it's definitely could take you to the next level in your surfing, especially for the women.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Well, I think it's a disadvantage in a lineup, you know, physically speaking, just no offense to women, but it's just physically speaking, it's very crowded and people are hustling for waves, so they might not get as many opportunities to get that perfect section to ramp out on. So that's a great thing in my mind. That's coming. And do you see in the future maybe a QS event being held at a wave pool?
They've done them already. Actually, I ran 2 Rip Curl Grom Search national finals at Waco back in the day, and I partnered up with American Wave Machines, and I got to design the Grom Bomb wave actually. No way. So I got to be in on that, and we created a format that worked. We like made it so it was 3 wave sets with enough time in between each wave so the judges could see each wave clearly, because the way that the 3-wave set was originally. It was the waves were so close together, like there's no way a judge could actually judge 3 waves in a row. So we kind of created our own wave, and I think that was in 2018, 2019. I forget the years already at this point, but
Yeah.
so we ran 2 events there. I think they were the first ever like amateur Grom events of it. I already know in Australia they run a QS event in near Melbourne.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Sick. So that probably, in the future will be happening more and more, I assume. Amazing. Have you had a chance to go down to Palm Springs and check that one out?
I haven't been lucky enough to, the timing hasn't been right, but Shane Magnuson, who runs that place, is an old friend, and early on we talked quite a bit about partnering up and doing some stuff there, but I'm sure one day I'll get down there.
Excellent.
But yeah, one thing on the wave pools too is like I got to go to the surf ranch a few times and watch that firsthand and be with a lot of the pro surfers, and like a guy like Owen Wright would always tell me how it was like one of his favorite events because it eliminated any chance basically. So it was really truly him versus competitors on a even playing field. So he loved it. He like really looked up, because like a lot of people hate on that event and say it's a bit like repetitive and hard to watch because it's so long and the wave's a minute long and all that. But like for the athletes, I thought it was a really cool way for them to be like test themselves, mentally, especially mentally and physically. Like if you have the wherewithal to handle that, doing, quality maneuvers for that long on that long of a wave is really hard to do, and to complete a ride and you see it, and then the pressure cooker, because then they know what score they need, and it eliminates all like the chance that's within the ocean. So it's kind of a cool perspective to see from him on that.
Yeah. And then like speaking of competition, this is just something, I don't know if it's a pet peeve of mine, and I understand why it's in place, but you'll see a surfer catch a wave and they rip the top off, they launch a huge air, do a couple more turns, and then, at the very end, they're pumping, and there's just a tiny little section, and, if they don't hit that section cleanly, or they might just kind of like bog or something, a rail. Sometimes it feels like, to me, they're docking a lot of points based on something like unsubstantial in my mind. But I guess in the eyes of a judge, they want to see control and cleanness of rides, right?
Yeah, I mean, and so I did have some background in judging too as well. Like I had this little transition year where I did spend some time with Bill Seitz, the North America head judge. So I did a little bit of QS and Pro Junior coaching. So he taught me a lot, which I've been able to apply to my own business and whatnot. But judges are supposed to judge what happens on the wave, like not what doesn't happen. So they basically judge you up to the point where like you do fall. So like if you fell on that last section, they're not supposed to like dock you at all, actually. Maybe it doesn't always look like that from the outside, or with the broadcasters maybe announce or explain things. But if the judge is doing their job, they're going to judge you on everything you did on that wave and not like what didn't happen. So I know obviously like finishing the wave, kind of like we're all humans, and like it's nice to see a wave completed at the end. And like there's always the debate about if they came out like the doggy door versus the main exit of the tube, things like that. And the debates within judging are endless, and I've been amongst many of them, and even have had to go to like reviews with the head judge at the end of the day of many events, QSs and Challenger Series events, and been in some interesting meetings and whatnot. So it's and then of course with social media, that shit blows up big time across the world, depending what country you're representing and who your favorite surfers are. So the judging thing, I think it's just going to be an endless battle of opinions.
Yeah, let's keep this going. So I feel like, I don't know, 10 years ago, certain things were like in vogue, and I think certain people had an impact on that. Like, for example, John Florence and the down carve, or the layback, like I think Tyler Wright's an amazing surfer, but sometimes I'm like, you don't need to do the Larry layback anymore. I don't know. Do you feel like
she's actually, I think, evolved past that now?
Okay. Yeah, sure.
But I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
There was a time where that little drop arm carve wasn't doing it.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I do feel like it was a style of surfing that, we've always appreciated being point break surfers, but then it's interesting that, it went from like the 360 airs and back to a emphasis on this rail surfing, which I'm a fan of.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see any shift happening now? Are there any things that may be extra pleasing to the judges that you want to, encourage your groms to be like, hey, they're really scoring this high right now. Like, go for this.
So yeah, I was fortunate enough last season on the Challenger Series to work with Nat, former Rookie of the Year, 7 years on the CT and all that. So we kind of had an ongoing joke the whole year about how like they just want the bigger waves and the biggest sections, and they put that in the notes. But like for us, what our argument is, and I really hope it shifts, is just we want good surfing to be rewarded.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not on the biggest wave of the day, like if someone rips it's a foot or 2 feet difference in wave height. But if the guy just destroys the smaller wave with world class high level surfing, we just want to see that rewarded versus like necessarily like hitting that biggest section, because that kind of puts a little bit more like luck into it, I guess, whoever gets that one wave. So then it becomes like this like wave catching contest.
Right.
And like you kind of see it like that's I think the only flaw that I'm kind of seeing right now. I think the scoring's pretty damn good as far as the mix of maneuvers and how they really in power surfing and rail surfing is rewarded highly. Aerial surfing is still being rewarded accordingly, in my opinion. But I think it's like we were always like just a big lip line closeout is going to score giant kind of every time. And yeah, it's gnarly and it's hard, but it's kind of like you're kind of just placing your board there sometimes. And it is like dramatic,
Yeah.
but that's kind of one thing.
Totally. Yeah. Well, you got to keep it in consideration, I guess. But like you said, just knowing it on the other hand that there are some really extremely difficult things to do on smaller waves too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
I'm not encouraging people to ride the smallest waves. I'm just saying if the wave difference in size is only a foot or two, and the guy on like the little bit smaller wave is surfing that much higher of a level, I think that's what should be rewarded.
yeah, no, I agree. And going back to young surfers these days, I know that fitness was like a super duper big deal for a long time, and still is. Are there surfers on tour who, the only exercise they do is lifting a beer or something? Not to pick on anyone or name anyone, but I'm just thinking like, like I find it really amazing. Like a guy like Peter Mel can just, do yoga, and maybe I don't know exactly else he does. I know he's not getting super nuts in the gym. He's told me that.
Yeah, he's told me that too.
So and he's going out there and he's rushing and getting ragdolled in the biggest mavs. So, but he might just be a freak of nature. And is the fitness thing still something that you want to encourage your athletes to kind of take seriously?
Yeah, I think like surfing a ton is the number one key. Like surfing a lot, especially when you're young. Like surf, 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 and being in really good surf shape so that in a long heat you can have that ability to dig deep and pull yourself out of heavy situations, and try not to be out of breath and deliver on a wave at the last second of a heat after paddling all the way back out. So I think if you're able to be at that level of fitness, for me, I think that's probably good enough. You know what I mean? Obviously you've seen it's exploded the training and surfing, and it does help, of course. Like being stronger is definitely going to help. You're going to throw more spray and be a more powerful surfer, but you also need to be limber and loose and flexible and all that as well. I don't think there's one rhyme or reason or one way to go about it, but I think there's a big, variation in the surfers and their fitness as like programs. I know John, from what I've heard and seen, for the most part, he didn't really work out all that much. He did a little bit, but not as much as some guys you're seeing out there. But then like, Medina is gnarly in the gym, and guys that I've worked with like Cole Hauschman and Rio Waida are hardcore gym guys, and their bodies are just yoked and they're gnarly and they're succeeding at a super high level. But I think just like I said at the beginning, just making sure your surf fitness can handle any situation you'd be put into, and all those different types of waves and scenarios, whether you're competing in Hawaii or even a huge south swell day at Huntington Pier is exhausting. Like it really is. The current's gnarly, swooping down the beach, and the waves are 6 to 8 foot. You got to do runarounds and things like that. So as long as you make sure you can handle that type of scenario, I think you're doing the right thing.
Yeah. And one thing, and who knows if this was really happening, at that time, but it felt like when we were growing up that at least with these contests, there used to be a lot more. It felt like there was some favoritism with the certain surfers. It felt like to us from up north
Mm-hmm.
that they were the kids down south. But I do know now that like NSSA they have more an open for kids up here to compete in, and that they have these prime events and stuff like that. But maybe just speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, just kind of the favoritism, I guess, or
Or if
just.
it's still present, or if that's
Mm-hmm.
even an issue, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe were we tripping?
No, I mean, I think the judges, again, they're all humans, and there's certain like, you know, flavors of the month, flavors of the year. Certain surfers get a little bit of the nod here and there. I think everyone would probably agree with that. It's always nice if you are that surfer, and I think sometimes the whatever, like the red colored jersey, you're like the highest seed in that heat. Sometimes they get the little bonus because they've been seen so much and they've accomplished a lot. So maybe they deserve it in some ways a little bit from the success they've had. But I think for the most part, it should be pretty equal. I guess to tell one story, I got like a slap on the wrist from the WSL about 3 years ago at the Haleiwa Challenger event. It was like round of 64, and I was coaching John Mel, and he was up against Ezekiel Lau and Jiao Chianca, and both of them were actually not on tour at the time, and they were both like ninth and 10th in the qualifying picture, top 10 make it. And John was on the best waves, and probably in my opinion did like the best surfing of that heat. And I was adamant he won that heat, and he got third
Mm-hmm.
in that heat. And we actually wrote a formal protest to the WSL. And I was kind of talking about the times I've done that before. It's only been a few times, but
Mm-hmm.
I posted something, and I don't ever do this, but I posted something on my Instagram account, and I was pretty rattled. I was pissed. John was pissed. Like, John was rated like 70th on the
Mm-hmm.
Challenger Series or something, and
Yeah.
these guys are 9 and 10. Then they needed that heat to qualify, and
Mm-hmm.
I think I wrote like a hashtag on my post, and it was like, judge the colors, not the names. So I meant
Mm-hmm.
just the color of the jersey.
Yeah.
And I got a text from someone there, and I basically got a warning from the commissioner's office, from their legal team, actually,
Wow.
that I had to take that down.
Okay.
And if I did it again, I'd be like expelled.
Okay. Well, interesting.
Yeah. Because
Well,
they said I basically was the integrity of the sport was being compromised by my comment,
right. Yeah.
which I
Well.
thought was hilarious. I got 2,000 followers or something, and somehow they saw that it was the day of.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, I guess people in control like to keep it that way. So, yeah. Oh, well.
And what's interesting too is like, so we went and met with them at the end of the day, John and I, and we met with the head judge, Luli, who then was only the Challenger head judge. Now he's actually the World Tour head judge, and he is the man. He was
Mm-hmm.
so cool. I respect this guy so much. He like treated us really fairly, brought us in the room. There's these big screen TVs where we watched all the waves. He had the replay guy there, like the commissioners of the WSL were there, like Travis Logie and stuff. It was super professional how they handled it. And he kind of explained the whole process of how they judge the heat, and he has his own. So the head judge doesn't actually score, right?
Right.
He's just watching the judges and kind of guiding them along. And if there's big discrepancies, he'll help kind of chime in and even out the score to make it so it makes more sense in the whole grand scheme of things. And he had his own scratch paper scoring the heat, and on his paper he had John making the heat,
Mm.
and that happens sometimes. And it was a 3-2 split, so two of the judges had John making it, three of them didn't.
Mm.
So it was basically as close as it gets, and he kind of showed us exactly how that breakdown was. And he said he at times was like a couple judges like, you guys might want to up. John was in green. You guys might want to up green score. He was on the committed section. He was on the best wave of the heat, and he cracked it twice. And like Zhao was on the corner bowl doing big power wraps, and like again, kind of almost the conversation we were having before, where this was the time where I was like, hey, my guy was on the bigger wave this time, and you guys really scored the bigger wave most of the time, but this time they opted not to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you gave it a shot. You gave your complaint, and that's about all you can do.
Yeah. And then for the surfer in that regard, I think it's just showing like he means business. He's just
Mm-hmm.
not gonna like take a loss like that lightly and just bail and go home and cry about it or whatever. He's gonna
Mm-hmm.
like stand up for himself, and
Yeah.
that's kind of what we did there.
Yeah.
And we don't do that all that often. It's only the times where you feel adamant.
Totally. And then speaking about about John, man, such an incredible talent, and he's just come so close a number of times to getting on the Challenger Series, and I feel like this year could be his year. And but just psychologically, what does that do to a surfer of that talent to put all that time and training and effort into something and come up short time and time again? How do they find the drive and resolve to keep going?
Yeah, that's a hardest question you asked. I think you might have to ask John himself that one. And just to clarify, so the reason why John was in like 70th on the Challenger, he was a replacement surfer that season, so he wasn't a full time competitor on the
Right.
tour. So he filled in for a couple events. That's kind of how he got into a
Mm-hmm.
couple of them, because he hasn't made it as a full time member yet.
Right.
He's been like you said, he's been crazy close. And last year when we were in Barbados and he just came up short, it was hard for both of us. You know, it was a gut punch. I had like a stomach ache for a couple of days almost after that because he's my local guy and we put so much time and effort and care and everything into it. But as far as him dealing with that, I think you'll have to ask John.
Yeah.
You know, I guess just for myself having to deal with those scenarios, like I want to be there for my clients and athletes as much as I can. So I'm there as a shoulder to cry on, sounding board. If you want to like go scream and cuss and do that, let's go off site and snap and have a beer or bottle of wine or whatever it might be. There's
Yeah.
definitely a coping mechanism, but just getting it out, super
Mm-hmm.
important, you know, I don't encourage anyone to like hurt anything, break anything. I really don't like that. But if you need a yell,
Yeah.
find some wind and go yell into it.
Yell into a pillow.
Seriously.
Yeah.
It helps.
Totally.
It releases, and that's proven. You know, put your head, I even tell them in the water, like put your head underwater and let out a little something. But yeah, I think just, you know, afterwards just breaking it down and just trying to nitpick it and figure out like, you know, what are the little areas I can grow and become better, and what did this teach me and what did I learn here, and you know, and how hungry am I and how bad do I want it, and if I want it, let's come back and be better next time.
Yeah, totally. Well, you know, it's only a matter of time with a lot of these guys, and if it's not, they're gonna go down swinging, and we can be proud of that. So, all right, well, let's shift gears just a little bit. Let's talk about fatherhood. How's that been so far? I haven't seen you, bro. You probably little late nights and just all that fun stuff.
Yeah, it's like all the books you read or advice you get, it's kind of like almost when it's happening, it doesn't even matter anymore. You know, it's your own little world, and you and your partner are just, it's your first time, you're figuring it out, you know, and I think it's so different. Every person's experience is so different. That's why you can't really take too much from what everyone said, but it's probably the hardest, definitely like the biggest challenge I've ever faced as far as just going through that whole birth process and those first few weeks of life for your kid. And you really just got to like go with the flow and buckle down and handle shit. You know, you got to be there for your wife and, you know, be there day in, day out, all night long, and help with whatever you can, because they're the true superheroes in the whole picture, you know, and you're just the additional support. And, but after those, so we're on to like week 8 now, and it's dramatically improved as far as just like our daily routine is getting much better, and he's sleeping already a lot better through the night and only having to wake up like 1 or 2 times to feed and all that. So, I didn't surf for about 3 weeks straight there. And then luckily we scored like all time swell. So I got to sneak back into a couple sessions and been surfing a little bit since then, but, definitely not as much as the past, but that's just going to be a part of that process, and that's fine with me.
Yeah, and just what have been the most touching or sweet or just putting the kid to bed, or what, you know, what is really filling your cup in being a father right now?
Yeah. Just the way, you know, your son or daughter like looks up at you and makes that little, you can feel that little connection. And when you see him smile, definitely his heart melting, and, just the amount of love you can feel, you know, there's no words at this point in time. There's just energy, and, you can feel that energy, and it's like nothing else out there.
Yeah,
Definitely have to experience it for yourself.
that's so sick. I'm so happy for you, dude.
Yeah, I'm so stoked on it. And like the main thing like I've been thinking about a lot lately is just like the change in perspective with my priorities and whatnot. And like I've had some like challenges, things come my way, but then like in the past it might have affected me a bit more. But now it's like with having my son, it's like he means everything, and like these other challenges are just a small blip.
Yeah, you got the bigger picture. That's so cool. And then yeah, just kind of moving forward. One thing I was just curious to ask you is if there comes a point where these surfers who you're mentoring, they elevate to another level, say, for example, a full-time challenger bid or even a full-time CT gig, sorry, WSL
Yeah.
championship tour
Hmm.
gig. How does that affect? You have so many moving parts. Is that something that you could remain on someone's side if they're out doing one tour and then you're kind of, how do you distribute your
Yeah,
energy?
that's the biggest challenge I've faced, and figuring out, because I'm only one person in this picture, and I look at guys. So like one of my biggest inspirations is Leandro Dora in the coaching realm. I can't wait. I'd love to sit down with him one day and pick his brain on how he's created his business. But his business is called Myers Surf, and it's multi-dimensional, multi-levels, and he has a bunch of different coaches in his program
Mm,
at all different levels, from like
mm.
amateur. He does the CT, and then he's got like challenger, QS, all through Brazil.
Oh, wow,
It's
cool.
pretty sick. So it'd be cool to like at some point have some sort of resemblance of what that program looks like. I have a long way to go before I get there, but yeah, it's been challenging. I've hoped 4 surfers qualify for the world tour, and all 4 times I actually didn't end up going with them on the CT,
Mm-hmm.
which is obviously, it was super hard, really
Mm,
hard. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
like definitely think about that all the time, because that's a dream for me. And I'm 38, and I see myself doing this for a really, really long time. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing there's a lot of like high level CT coaches that are in their 50s and whatnot. So maybe, or 40s, 50s, whatever. So maybe there'll be a time when I'm able to follow through and be on the championship tour for that amount of time. But if you're going on the CT, it's like you're gone all year.
Right. Yeah.
You're gone.
You're gone.
9 months straight.
He
Oh,
gone.
yeah. So you won't see me Pleasure Point lineup at all at that point.
How do I
Yeah.
arrange this? No,
Yes.
I love surfing with you.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, you'll have a couple like stints at home, but not barely at all. But yeah, so I think I feel for those guys. Like Tommy Whitaker is one of the best coaches in the game right now. And every time I see him, it says it's tough, like managing his home life and that stuff, being away, but he's got the all-time crew with the Colapintos and Katie Simmers and whatnot. So, I mean, that's a dream for a coach to be with. Like, they're not only like the talent that they have, but the people they are and the positivity they have in their lives. So, yeah, there's a lot of amazing coaches on there doing it, but it's a challenge without a
Yeah,
doubt.
I bet. Well, I think that's about it for today, but is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Is there anyone else you want to thank or shout out to?
Yeah. Thank you, Neil, for always being a good friend and having this connection all these years. We've obviously told the story many times, but we had like an all-time surf day in 2009 that we both will never forget.
Yeah, 2008.
2008. See,
Yeah.
you remember it better than
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
It was the triple crown of Indonesian surfing.
Yeah, well, just to paint the picture for the audience, we woke up at the before light and we went with Demia Dorsey, photographer, and one of our heroes, Benji Weatherly, and we went to I don't know if it's secret anymore, but we went to a slab on Bali's east coast, and we got to the beach and it was just thumping on pretty much dry reef, and we walked out there, me, Benji, and Matt, and Benji goes to me and Myers, he goes, paddle out. He wanted us to paddle out first to see what happened to us, but anyways,
I think it was me or we both did, right? But I was the one who went down.
you
hard.
paddled out first and you got smoked, super smoked on your first wave. Anyways, that was super fun. Then we went to Karamas.
Yeah.
We scored perfect Karamas.
No one out.
Yeah, only a couple dudes out.
Because it was maxing.
It was maxing. And then, yeah, right after that, on the way back to the spot we were staying, we made a pit stop at Padang Padang and scored perfect Padang. And
It was all time.
it was all time. So that was a funny story because the boat had crashed that year, the pirate ship, or the
Yeah.
boat that got taken by the pirates. And there was all the oil in the water. So we paddled out and our wax was slick. And I think
Sketchy.
Benji actually paddled out closer to the boat and got completely covered with oil, and he couldn't even surf. So he
had
wasn't
to paddle in.
He had to paddle in.
Yeah.
He wasn't a happy camper on the way back, which for me was funny because I'm like, this guy is so cool. And then he's just pinched and, understandably.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had a great time on that trip and hopefully we can make it happen again, another little reunion tour. And I'm actually headed to Nicaragua tonight, so I'm pretty fired up on that. But anyways, Matthew Myers, thank you so much for coming. And is there one last thing you'd like to throw out there?
Yeah, just, I mean, at this point, there's still a couple little brands out there that support me in my business and my ventures. So I just want to thank like Lost Surfboards, big time for their support. FCS fins and accessories, they're so killer. And then Salty drinks, really healthy beverages have also been helping me out. And yeah, thanks to all them. Thanks for, all the surfers out there I've worked with over these years. So grateful for the time I've spent with them, and looking forward to my whole crew here in 2025, and looking forward to the future.
All right, sick, legendary. Matthew, thank you very much.
You got it, Neil, dude.
You. All right.